That sounds great.
You're being recorded now. Library System of Bradford County Financial Fridays. We are here as always with financial guru Matt from Visions Federal Credit Union. This week we're talking about identity theft. As always, if you have to step out or if you want to check back later, we will have the recording available both on Facebook and on our YouTube channel. And if you have any ideas for future programming, please, we'd love to hear them. You can put your questions down in chat and I will refer them to Matt toward the end, or if he catches it and he wants to speak up real quick, of course, he's always welcome to do that. Mr. Matt, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much again for having me. And like she said, if there are any questions throughout, feel free to ask them, or you can pop them right in the chat and I'll try and field them as they come through. And if not, of course, we'll have some time at the end for questions as well. Excuse me. But so our last Financial Friday, we talked about credit and all that good stuff. And it rolls really nicely into what we're talking about today, which is identity theft. And this is particularly important now more than ever, really, especially not only the timeliness of it being July 2nd right now, we're rolling into a holiday where we see kind of scams and online issues pop up, but also just in the pandemic that we've gone through in general, we're seeing a push towards these digital aspects. And with that, as secure as they are, which they offer a lot of different levels of security that we often don't always have, but as technology advances, so do the criminals and cyber crimes tend to go up as well. So today we're talking about identity theft, some tips and tricks on how to avoid it, how to safeguard yourself, and really just how to make everything go as smoothly as possible. Because when we're talking about finance, smoothness can never be overstated. Whether it's your opening an account or you're dealing with something bad that's happened, you want your process to go smoothly. So having the know-how of how to deal with identity theft, if it were to ever happen, and also some ways that you can potentially avoid it, really just makes everything go a lot smoother. So that's the overall goal. So first off, what is identity theft? So it's really easy to think, it's when somebody takes your information and pretends to be you or opens accounts under your name. But it really can be so much more than that. And oftentimes, especially as things advance, it is a lot more than that, which means it's smaller, it's harder to detect when it's done properly. So identity theft, in a nutshell, is when someone uses information about you without your permission. So that can be your debit card, your credit card, if they get a hold of either physically your card or just the numbers. They can try and steal your information that way. But it can be as far as if they get your medical insurance number or social security number, they can potentially go in and change your address on different accounts or open new accounts under a new address, and you'll never see that mail. Excuse me. So there are things to definitely look out for as far as what's going on in your account. So when we look at the overarching what is identity theft, it's anything. It can be as little as signing up for a magazine subscription under your name, and it can be as big as taking all of your money or changing your social security diversion as far as your accounts go. So there are a lot of different levels of identity theft, and we want to be aware of how these things happen and what we can do to protect ourselves. So before we really get into the nitty-gritty of it, I want to go through some statistics because they are very eye-opening. So 14.4 million consumers become victims of identity fraud each year, and 33% of US adults have experienced identity theft. So that's 1 in 3 people. So when you look at things financially as far as good and bad, if you're going to win the lottery, I think it's something along the lines of 1 in 100 million. So unfortunately, identity theft statistics are much higher than that, being 1 in 3. So the odds are we all know somebody who has experienced some form of identity theft. And working in banks and different financial institutions, credit unions, as I have, I've seen this a lot, and unfortunately, more than you would think. And a lot of times it's very able to be rectified as far as running a dispute, closing down accounts. But it is just kind of a general pain. So we don't want people to have to come in and close out account, just open up a new one. We want everything to move smoothly and our financial journey to just stay on the path that we're on. So unfortunately, about the 1 in 3 US adults that have experienced identity theft, 1 in 5 victims experience it more than once. So of course, the goal is to never experience it at all. But once you have experienced it, if you have the know-how of how to react to it, what steps to take, you're going to be less likely to fall victim again. And that's a really big goal, because they cast a wide net, the cyber criminals. They're going to try and get as many people as possible. And if you fall for it once, that's okay. Things happen, as long as we get on the right path and get it rectified as soon as possible. We just want, moving forward, to know how to not let it happen again. So that moves us into the next stat of, there's a new victim of identity theft every 2 seconds. So when you think about how frequent it is, keep that in mind, because it's a real problem that's happening every 2 seconds. It's the most common consequence of a data breach. So it can be at no fault of your own. If a company has a data breach, your information may be at risk as well. And that's where kind of those password protections and different options of tracking really come into play, and are really important to know what's being done with your information. Are you safe, or are you using kind of outdated passwords? Are you using the same password for every account? Things that we want to steer away from and really safeguard ourselves. And then, of course, emotional distress is reported by 77.3% of identity theft victims. How that's not 100% blows my mind, but maybe that just means that there's a certain smaller percentage of people that are very well prepared to deal with this. And that's where we hope to get everybody who is a part of this presentation as well. So lower the emotional distress, but when something like identity theft does happen, or even when there's just an attempt on it and you're alerted, that can cause some form of stress. So as much as we can limit that is ideal. So how is an identity stolen? And there are ways that an identity is stolen that we all kind of think about. We can rattle off 3 to 5 different ways that we generally think that they're going to be stolen, but there are much more advanced techniques that are being done, but oftentimes they're not needed. Oftentimes, unfortunately, they are either told directly from the person whose identity is being stolen the information, or it's a trustworthy issue that information is passed off that probably shouldn't be, but then it got taken advantage of. So there are ways to steal mail, your wallet, your purse. That's why you always generally hear the idea of don't carry your social security card in your wallet or in your purse, because if you lose it, that's your social security number. It's right there. And that's really what we want to avoid people from having. So stealing mail is also a big one, right from your mailbox. When you think about it, a mailbox is generally pretty accessible to everybody. So if you're getting bills in the mail, whether it's medical bills or just things with general information, bank account statements, that's why you see a lot of institutions moving to e-statements. There's a lot of information in your mail, and it's often just a matter of opening up the mailbox and taking it out. So be aware of what you're expecting in the mail. And if it doesn't come, that should throw up a little bit of a red flag to make sure and monitor your reports, because those physical items that you have with your information on it is really, really easily accessible to people. And we want to avoid them getting certain information that could be in your wallet, purse, or in your mailbox. Also, there's phishing scams, there's emails. So that's if you get an email that you're not expecting, or it has a link that you're not sure about, or at my work email, we get notified whenever an email comes in from outside of our network or a trusted source. So it's going to give a little bit of a warning that tells you, be careful about what you click on here. So if you're not expecting an email, or if it comes from an email that doesn't look quite right, or there are spelling mistakes in it, really be very conscious about what links you click on, because it can look very, very legitimate. You can click on a link and then it can have you put in information that's going to lead to your identity being stolen. oftentimes it's those general questions that we see: your mother's maiden name, what street did you grow up on? Just trying to get more information from you, so they can go and open up different accounts under your name. There's also social engineering, and this is a more personal form. And this is what I kind of alluded to earlier when I said that oftentimes the information is simply given out. So social engineering is when somebody gives you a call and pretends to be somebody that they're not, and somebody that should have access to this information. They might call and pretend to be a bank representative, a sheriff, I've heard before, things like that. And they say that you need to give them information. Really definitely be careful about who you're giving information to. And if you receive a call that's asking for information, always feel free to say something like, I'm not very comfortable giving this information over the phone. Would you mind if I hung up and called back a number that I trust and know is you? So if somebody called from the sheriff's office and said, we need XYZ information, you can say, I'm happy to assist in any way that I can. However, I'm not very comfortable giving this information over the phone. I'm going to hang up and I'm going to call this sheriff's office back. And then if it's truly the sheriff, they're going to be expecting your call. You'll be able to get right back on with that person and talk to them. But if it's not, you are not going to be able to reach that person anymore if you call the real sheriff's office. So there are little things that you can do to safeguard yourself, and that is adding that buffer of giving out information, because anybody can claim to be anybody else. So we want to make sure that we're taking the steps to really make sure we're speaking to who should be talking to you. And when they do talk to you, they are going to talk to you with a very, very much a sense of urgency. So they're going to give you a timeline, and you need to do this by this day or time, or else something bad is going to happen. Whenever somebody talks to you with a sense of urgency like that, another red flag should pop up and think, I don't know if this is legitimate, because normally they would either get in touch with you much earlier, and get everything taken care of, or they're going to come with a more professional demeanor as far as the steps you need to take. A professional place like a financial institution, social security office, even a sheriff's office, they're really not going to come to you and say, you have to do this by this time or else, because that's not how they function. So social engineering is definitely something to be aware of. Just make sure you know who you're talking to, and nobody in a legitimate office of that sense, excuse me, is going to be offended or push back on you if you try to verify that they are who they say. Because if they're working in that capacity, they know about these scams. They know that these things happen. So make sure that you're doing your due diligence to make sure you're speaking to who they say they are. Because if you were to call them and say, I'm Matt, they would say, okay, Matt, well, I'm going to need to ask you some more questions to verify you. So that's a two-way street there. You're going to want to do the same thing for them if they call you. And then again, dumpster diving, we talked a little bit about how physical items can be stolen. This is why you also want to be sure to have something like a shredder or rip up information. So if you get medical bills or credit card statements or bank statements, you want to rip them up to some degree, or get a shredder. And then I always suggest, if you are going to shred your mail, also shred mail that has no information on it. That can also kind of throw them off, because a big part of this is making it as hard as possible. Because if a person who's dumpster diving finds a garbage bag and it's full of shredded paper, they're going to be less likely to try and piece them together. If there's just a little bit of shredded paper that looks like it might just be 1 or 2 sheets of paper, they might just gather that up and try to tape it together and gather information that way. But if there's more paper in there that kind of looks like this, but it's not, and it doesn't have any information on it, but a little bit of it does have information on it, that's going to be a big hassle for them to go through and piece those all together. So if you are going to shred your important information, go ahead and shred some unimportant information as well, because that's going to make it a lot harder for them to get what they want. And that's really the goal. They're not trying to work hard. they're just trying to get information quick. So if you make it more difficult for them and more time consuming for them, they're going to be less likely to attempt. And then family member or friends, this happens more than you would think. But again, I would never say be hesitant of all your family members or your friends. Sometimes it's inadvertent as far as what things do. Maybe a debit card gets used by a family member and they forget to tell you, and you go through the process of, well, my identity was stolen because I don't recognize this charge. So really be careful of who you're trusting with your information. It can be inadvertent, but it can also be done on purpose from somebody close to you. They can steal your like I said, debit cards. They can steal your mail, anything like that. If they know your information, they could potentially sign up for things under your name. So be diligent as far as what you're tracking, what everything's happening in your life, in your finances, because you never know where it's going to come from. And even if you trust the people that are close to you, be aware that it is an option that if your identity does get stolen, that you're going to want to check out anybody that you know it might have been or has access to your information. So just knowing that all sorts of possibilities are out there. Again, don't live your life in fear, but more so set yourself up so you have a strong tracking method in mind. In case any of this ever happens, you can really get a hold on what's going on and how to address it. So what can happen with your info? We talked a little bit about this, but really just going into everything to look out for is really important, because if you suspect that your identity has been stolen, you're going to want to cover all of your bases and really check into everything that you have going on. So they can buy things with your credit card, so you really want to check your credit card statements. They can even apply for new credit cards, which last Financial Friday we talked about, and we're going to talk a little bit more later on about your credit report and how to analyze that to make sure that everything is how it should be and that there's nothing fraudulent on there. They can also open a phone, electricity, or gas account under your name. And these are a little bit more tricky because you're not going to see these on your credit report. So a phone bill, in these cases, you would want to see your account statements, your credit card statements, anything like that, to see if there is a payment going somewhere where you're not aware that it's supposed to be going, or if you have AT&T and you see a bill from Verizon, that's definitely something to check out. Or if they're unable to change the address on your accounts, if you start getting billing statements that you don't know why it would come from them. So if it's for energy, if you have NYSEG or but you get a bill from Penn Electricity or something like that, and you don't use them, you're really going to want to look into that. So make sure you're staying on top of your mail. I know it's easy to throw out junk mail as you get it, but if it's a company that you know and that you know you don't do business with, open it up, take a look at it, and just something to keep in mind. They can also steal your tax refund if they are able to change your address with Social Security. If they get your Social Security number, they can change your address, steal your tax refund, anything that you have going. If you get Social Security, it might be deferred. So if you see you miss a payment or you're expecting something that you don't get, it's definitely something to reach out to Social Security about and just verify your information, verify when the last time anything was changed was, and just making sure everything's in order. A lot of this is staying on top of your personal finances and all of your accounts and making sure that everything is as it should be. And this should be being done at once a quarter, once a month, whatever you're comfortable with, but just making sure everything's in order is really, really important. They can also get medical care under your name. This generally you will see under your credit report as medical bills, because if they're using your identity, they're probably not paying. So they're gonna bill it to you. You'll be able to see that. Or if you get medical bills mailed to you that you obviously didn't go to a hospital for, something to keep in mind. And then also another tricky situation is if they get arrested and they know your information, they can put that down. That's going to be public record. It's going to show up, but it is a pain to deal with. It's another hassle for you. And again, we're all about smoothness and convenience. So as little as we can deal with that, the better. So just being aware of what can happen is really important in case it does happen, because you'll be able to think, okay, this is an option that happened. I need to look into all of these things and make sure things are as they should be, or if they're not, hopefully it's just one of the few, but we may need to take further steps with the Social Security office, with your financial institution. Just knowing who to reach out to for what is very, very important. So as I mentioned before, knowing your credit report and how to make sure everything is as it should be is really important. We talked last Financial Friday about credit. So if you joined us for that, this is a little bit of a refresher, but you can get a free credit report. You can get one from each of the 3 bureaus every year. So that's 3 per year. And it's really important to stay on top of this and make sure, again, knowing everything is as it should be. And I'm going to say that a lot, but it is really, really important, especially when we're dealing with identity theft, cyber crimes, anything like that. Staying diligent on your tracking is very, very important. So your credit report, again, is laid out line by line. It's going to show all your accounts that you have open, your personal information, anything like that that's on there. So here's the contact information. I'll leave this up for a little bit before we go on to the next slide, because that's going to tell us, what we can do with our credit report. But it is really important to know who to reach out to and how you can get a hold of these reports to make sure that everything is correct. So you can go to annualcreditreport.com. The phone number for annualcreditreport.com is right there. There's also the contact information for Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. They're all the 3 major credit bureaus that you can check your credit report with. So now that you have your report, what do you do with it and what's on there? So if you suspect that your identity has been compromised, you definitely want to get on top of your report, because it's going to show inquiries on there. So it's going to show if somebody is going around applying for loans under your name. It's also going to show all of your open accounts. So you're going to want to go through line by line to make sure that all your accounts are accounted for and there's no new account, there's no unfamiliar account there. But also what's often missed is all of your information and making sure that that is correct. So it's going to show your name, address, birth date, previous addresses, and those are the addresses are what you really want to focus on, because when you're looking at identity theft and what can be done and the potential harm that can be done, a lot of that comes from changing your address, because then you're not going to get your own bills. You're not going to get the new potentially fake or fraudulent bills. So it can really do a lot to your credit, because if you're getting mailed statements for your credit card and they never come and then you forget to pay them, that's going to hurt your credit on its own, let alone if somebody else has diverted your mail and they've opened up new accounts to accounts that you don't know about, and they're obviously not going to pay them. So this can do a real number to your credit. So making sure that you're staying up to date with your credit report, making sure everything is correct, is really important, because it can save you that snowball effect of one thing leading to another. Even if they just opened one small loan that they don't pay, if it wasn't going to do a whole lot to your credit score as it is, if they diverted your mail elsewhere and you start missing payments, that's going to snowball into really, really hurting your credit. So just making sure that you know where everything's going is really, really important. So you want to go line by line, verify your accounts, make sure that you look at all the inquiries, make sure, yes, I did that, or no, I didn't do that. So then you can move forward and go to the right places for the right things. So your financial institution, your Social Security office, you can file complaints with the FTC, you can try and get things wiped from your credit report, and they will if your identity has truly been stolen, because you, again, have the right to correct information and making sure that your report reflects your true activity. So when we're looking at identity theft, now that we've kind of gone through some of the broad basics, we really want to look at the 3 Ds of how to protect yourself. So that comes protecting yourself before, protecting yourself during while it's happening, and protecting yourself after. protection comes on to all levels. So there are really the 3Ds. There's deter, detect, and defend. So if we're looking at how do we prevent this from ever happening to us, we want to look at how to deter identity thieves. If it's currently happening or you're suspicious that it might be happening, we want to look at how to detect if these things are really happening. And then if this has already happened to you, and you know that your identity theft has happened, you want to know how to defend yourself. So what steps do you take in order to rectify this situation? So if you take nothing else away from this, one, take away that you always want to be diligent and make sure that things are as they should be, but also take away the 3Ds, take away the deter, detect, and defend. So when we're looking at deterrence, we talked about a couple of these, but a big part is being conscious of everything you do. So shredding your financial statements, protect your social security number, because that's the big missing piece in a lot of identity theft. And that's what these social engineers, these con men, just in general, this is what they're going to try to get out of you, is your social security number, because a lot of your information is already out there. So when we're looking at personal information, the toughest thing that I always run into is when you look at people who are heavy check writers. You sometimes see a little bit more identity theft there. As much as cyber crimes increase, when we think about what identity theft truly is and using our information without our knowledge, everything short of your social security number that's needed to steal an identity is right there on a check. And that's unfortunate. And checks are a great form of payment. A lot of people use them all the time, but being conscious of who you're writing checks to is also very important, because when you think about what's on a check, you have your name, your address, your account number, your bank's routing number, and your signature is all right there on that check. So if you hand out a check to somebody that you really don't trust, they now have all those pieces, but they don't have your social security number, which is great. But unfortunately, they do have a lot of other information that's right there. So being conscious of who you're writing checks to and how you're making payments is really important. And this is why we're seeing a lot of that push towards digital, because there are extra layers of security. As much as cyber criminals try to advance along with the times as far as technology goes, the financial institutions and different apps and security it really has never been better. So when we're looking at security, digital things are a real positive, but we really need to get up to speed as far as everything else. So just think about the information that you're giving out and who you're giving it out to. Just as you wouldn't just give your social security number to some random person on the phone, maybe think twice about paying somebody that you don't know. Maybe it's a contractor, maybe it's somebody else, in a check. So if you don't fully trust somebody, think twice about how you're paying them and what information you're really giving to them. Again, never click on links sent in unsolicited emails. That goes back to the phishing scheme. Those links can lead to viruses. They can lead to you having to put in information that you probably shouldn't. But they're just different ways to gather information. A lot of these thieves try to just gather bits of information in different forms, so then they can piece it together and they have a good picture of your entire identity. So being sure that again, being really conscious about what we click on, what we give out, anything like that, is very, very much a priority. And then don't use obvious passwords. Try and make them as unique as possible to where somebody wouldn't be able to just guess what your password is. And now we see a lot of things where you at least need numbers or special characters, and those are great, but try to steer clear of just ending it in 1 exclamation point or something like that, just to fit the quota. When we're looking at passwords, we really want this to be strong, because there's so much of your information that's guarded by these passwords that we want to make it strong. And if there are extra layers like a fingerprint or an eye scan, those are great as well. But really be conscious about what passwords you're using. Don't put your name in it. Don't put the year you were born. Don't put your birthday, anything like that in your password. and then keeping your personal information in a secure place. So again, that goes back to the best example I can give is don't carry your social security card around in your wallet. Anything that if you lose it, it's gone and it's hard to get back, or it's a process to deal with. Don't just carry that around on your person all the time, because life happens, things do get lost. But if you know that things are in a secure place in your home or elsewhere, that's a really great start. So when we're looking at deterrence, a lot of this is common sense. And the biggest thing that you can always say is just be careful. Day to day, any decision that you make, any information you give out, just be careful. And that is the best advice that anybody can ever give, is think before you act and be careful, because again, identity theft comes in different forms and comes from a lot of different angles. And if the more careful you are and the more diligent you are about keeping track of your information, the better off you're going to be. Next, we want to talk about detect. So this is detecting how these things are happening and how you can stay alert of what's going on with your information. So detecting suspicious activity by routinely monitoring your accounts. So that's getting your credit report. That's taking a look at your bank statements line by line, making sure everything is how you remember it. And even keeping a check register that lines up with your transactions on your bank statements. Make sure that you're always matching those up. So really taking that extra time to safeguard all of your information is going to save you a lot of headaches later on if identity theft ever were to happen. So we really want to be alert to the signs that require immediate attention, such as mails or bills that do not arrive as expected. As we talked about with the mail, a lot of these things come from changing your address. So if you know that you should be getting mail day after day, but for some reason you're not getting any mail, you want to get in touch with your post office or your social security office, anybody that would be sending you any mail, and ask what address they have on file and make sure that it wasn't changed inappropriately, or just as a good way to figure out where your mail is going. That's something that you should be aware of if you're expecting something that doesn't come. That's always a red flag. Even if it is just lost mail, it's definitely worth looking into, because you don't necessarily know that it's just a human error or an accident that happened. It can be something more devious. So unexpected credit cards or account statements, like we talked about, if they cannot change your address, if they were able to get enough information to sign up for a new account or a new credit card, but they weren't able to change your address, you're going to start getting bills and statements that you don't recognize. And really getting anything that's addressed to you in your name that you don't recognize should be looked into. And again, that comes with that being careful. And then denials of credit for no apparent reason. If somebody's out there putting in inquiries for you or opening accounts for you, eventually they're going to get to the point where they've opened too many accounts or they've maxed out too many credit cards and they're not going to be able to get more. So if you get a random denial for credit, that's a big red flag, and you're going to want to contact your institutions or contact that creditor that sent you that denial and ask what's going on. And then you're going to need to go through the steps of rectifying this situation through credit bureaus, through your social security office, through your financial institution, and then calls or letters about purchases that you did not make. So really detecting comes from anything that kind of makes you say, should be looked into, especially when your private information is on the line and being considered. Anything that doesn't quite sit right with you should be looked into. And when you look at, well, I don't want to make a big deal out of nothing, it's really not a big deal at all to give a call to your financial institution or any other creditor. A lot of times that's their job to take care of problems that you might think is a problem and isn't, or if it's a true problem, they're there to work through it with you. I also am a CPR instructor and professional rescue instructor. And I always say, if you think that there's something wrong, you're never going to be faulted or get in trouble for calling 911 if you think that something's going wrong. And the same thing applies for your finances and your personal information. If you think something might be wrong, it's definitely worth a phone call to probe into what's going on. Nobody's ever going to say, you shouldn't have called me for this. If you have a legitimate concern that your identity has been stolen or somebody is opening accounts or using your information in a way that they shouldn't be, that absolutely warrants investigation. So never hesitate to reach out to your institution, even if it's just a starting point. Even if you know that, I know you're not the Social Security office, but I'm nervous that this happened. Your financial institution will be able to look back in your account, look at anything that might be suspicious, and they're there for you. They're there to walk you through what may have happened. So really, if you do kind of get your rabbit ears of what's that going on, or something just makes you say, definitely look into it. So, and then that starts with at home, getting your financial statements and your credit report and really walking through it. And even if you're new to these things of what a financial statement or a credit report looks like, you can generally figure it out. But also, if you have them and you want to be walked through more thoroughly, call your financial institution and make an appointment to sit down with somebody. Again, that's what they're there for. We at financial institutions want to make your financial journey in your life as smooth as possible. So we're always happy to sit down with you and go over what's going on and what means what, because sometimes I've had it at my job now and different jobs, people come in and say, I don't recognize this payment. This is from a random creditor that I have no idea, I've never used before. But it turns out that it's just a Macy's credit card that is processed under a different creditor's name. It doesn't say Macy's on it. It says something like Credit One or something like that. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's a different credit company. And it turned out that they did have a Macy's card and they were using it. So it can be things like that. And it's a big form of relief when you find out that it was you that made that purchase and it wasn't somebody that was stealing your identity. But again, it's something that I never mind working with people if they feel that their identity has been compromised or there's something that doesn't sit quite right with them. I'm more than happy to sit down with somebody, and that generally is the feeling of anybody that works in a financial institution as well. So never hesitate to reach out, especially if you're concerned about your personal information. So detecting is really just looking out for those things that make you say, and then moving forward with that. Then finally, our third D is defend. So how do we defend against making it worse? How do we stop that snowball effect? Once we have detected something that's wrong, how do we then act? So there are a few things you can do outside of what I was just talking about of reaching out to your institution or creditors. You definitely want to place a fraud alert on your accounts. That's going to really block anything else from going through unless you personally make sure that you either give a password or you're personally present or anything like that. It's not going to let things go through from somebody that's not you. And it's going to also alert financial institutions from different branches within the institution that you are going to want to take extra care in case you want to come in and withdraw money. So if I felt that my identity was compromised, and I might call Visions and say, I want a fraud alert on my account. I'm going to need to make sure that if money is withdrawn from my account, it's going to need to be me that does it. I'm going to need to be present for that and sign for it and make sure that it is actually me. But those fraud alerts are very helpful. And if something does come up, if somebody tries to use your card in an ATM and there's a fraud alert, they'll be able to ping what ATM that's at, and they're going to be able to figure out the fraud a lot easier. So definitely you want to place a fraud alert on your account. And you also for sure want to file a police report, because like I said, these cyber criminals particularly, but scammers in general, like to cast a wide net. If you're targeted by a fraudulent call or a scam email or any other form, it's very rare that you are singled out. They're probably sending it to hundreds of people and just trying to see who responds. So if you file a police report, it's going to allow them to kind of compile what's going on more, and hopefully catch who's doing this, but just making sure that maybe a public communication goes out that there's been an increased number of phishing emails or what have you. But filing a police report really can help, because the more people that do, the more information can be gathered from different sites, and hopefully it can shut down the scamming. And then you potentially will need to close your accounts and open up new ones. So you would need to go and put in file a complaint with the FTC, and you can call other creditors, but you don't want somebody to get a hold of all of your accounts. So if somebody has your personal information and they get one of your credit card information, you really don't want them to be able to get a hold of your either bank accounts or other cards, anything like that. So until you feel like your identity is back in a spot where it's safe and secure, you may want to consider closing other accounts as well, just so they don't get a hold of the rest of your money. And then report your complaint with the FTC. So they're a great resource as far as reporting concerns or anything like that. And I believe it's our next slide that gives some resources for if your identity ever is stolen, what to do, who to reach out to, where are some informational materials outside of presentations like this or my contact. There are also government agencies and different options from different financial institutions that can help walk you through this. So defending is really taking the proper steps after the fact to make sure that your identity can get back to being secure, and you've taken all the proper steps, and the proper people have been alerted, and you're really getting your finances back on track. So go to your financial institutions and your creditors, place your fraud alerts. Anymore with credit cards, a lot of them have apps that come where you can turn your card right off. So if you see something that is concerning to you at all on your credit card statement, you can go in and you can freeze your card. You can unfreeze it just on your own. So it is a really nice feature that you can potentially shut down your cards temporarily so nothing can be used, and then hopefully it gets rectified and you don't need to close your accounts, but that's always an option down the line as well. But also filing a police report, make sure it gets out there, and hopefully you can give them enough information, or they can piece information together from different reports that can help shut down the scammers. And like I said, you can also close accounts, open up new ones with different numbers, so your information won't be given that way. And on the new accounts, you can add extra layers of security as well, such as passwords. If you went to go withdraw money in person, you may have to give a password if you so choose. But there are definitely different options you can take, and sitting down and talking with somebody who deals with these things on a day-to-day basis is really important. And that's a really great line of defense of sitting down with a banker at your institution and say, what steps should I take? What do you suggest as far as security goes? And then also reporting any complaints to the FTC is another great step to take, because they're really the overseers of financial fraud and really ensuring that everything is correct. Because when your finances are involved, and if your money gets taken, anything like that, your institutions and your creditors can submit disputes saying that it wasn't you that made the charge, and you'll be able to get provisional credit back, and making sure that the investigation goes back and shows that it truly wasn't you, they'll be able to reimburse you. So your money is insured at financial institutions. So if things like this do happen, it is a pain, but you definitely can get that money back if it truly wasn't you that made the purchase. So as I said before, there are some great resources, and Leah, I can send you this slide as well, because it is a really great kind of layout of what are the proper steps to take, or where can you just find out more information. So Visions, we offer a lot of information as far as this goes. You can go to visionsfcu.org/security, and it's going to give you just some resources on fraud, scams, more, just things to look out for. You can also go to identitytheft.gov. This will guide you through a personal recovery plan. When I used to work in a bank branch, I used to use their checklist here. So it is nice to have that checklist, because no matter how confident you are, how knowledgeable you are about how to deal with situations like this, when when your identity does get stolen, it is jarring and it makes you almost rush because there is that sense of urgency to get it fixed. But rushing often makes you forget certain things along the way. So being sure that you have this checklist that runs you through all the proper steps to take is very, very helpful because it's going to ensure that you don't forget to do anything, any of those little pieces that might have flown under the radar otherwise. Just having that at your fingertips and just say, okay, I can calm down because I know that I need to do X, Y, Z, can really help the process. There's also onguardonline.gov. This is another resource that gives you kind of tips and tricks on identity theft fraud. There are videos, there are games that you can kind of gamify this and make it more fun and interesting if you're more somebody who learns interactively. This is a good resource of kind of giving scenarios of what should you do in each setting. And then again, I will continue to harp on this, is annualcreditreport.com. Getting a free credit report is a phenomenal way to keep everything in order and make sure that all of your pieces are in the right spot. And as we're looking at these, I cannot stress enough that when you're looking at the 3 Ds, the deter, detect, and defend, you really want to think, be careful. So anything that you do in your financial journey should be well thought out, and it should be a very careful and diligent process. So if anything makes you second guess if you should be doing this, look a little bit more into that. I'm not saying that every time that something makes you go, is identity theft, but everything with your personal information or your finances, it's such an important topic that if it does make you think twice, it's worth looking into further. So being careful is something that nobody can ever blame you for, and nobody's ever going to fault you for being careful. So definitely make sure that you are taking the proper due diligence to protect yourself. And so as problems like identity theft become more prevalent, now more than ever, Americans need to take their financial health seriously. And this information is the utmost important. And this is a really important quote because, we are moving into a more digital era. We are moving into an era where information is more readily available. So just making sure that you know what's going on with your information is more important than ever. And it's at one point, it's easier to gather what's going on in your finances and with your personal information because there's more tools and opportunity for you to track them. But it also is more difficult because you do have a lot of different things going on. There are almost a lot of cooks in the kitchen is a good way to think of it. So making sure that nobody gets forgotten as far as when you're dealing with this, get that checklist, make sure that you've checked X, Y, and Z, because you don't want to go talk to the Social Security office, go talk to your credit card companies, go talk to the post office, but then forget to talk to your financial institution and then have somebody drain your bank account. So just making sure that while it is easier to track all your information, there may be more things to track than you're used to. So having an overarching broad mindset of I need to take care of all of this information is really important. And that's why things like those resources are really great because they're going to give you the checklist of what to check up on. But again, be careful, make sure that your information is secure and you're taking the proper steps before, during, and after anything like this happens. And if you are diligent enough, you should be able to catch it early. And if you deter well enough, hopefully identity theft will never happen to you. Even if you get those emails and those phone calls that are trying to dig for information, if you are diligent enough, they're not going to get the information that they want. So it's going to help you a lot in the long run. And that is that's most of what I have here. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about Visions, my email's right there. I'm always available to answer any questions. I'm always happy to set up a time to sit down with anybody or take calls, answer any questions you would like. And if you're not a member and you would like to be a member, you can also use my coupon code when you open an account. It's just Matt75, and you can get up to $75 when you open a new account. But to that, I will gladly answer any questions that are out there.
Thanks, Matt. That sheet that had the resources, if you could send me that, that would be very helpful. I will make sure that,
Absolutely.
and of course, you know, I have questions. So would you say that in general, financial institutions are never going to call you and ask you to verify contact information? Like they're just going to usually say, there's an issue with your account, you need to come in kind of thing, rather than confirm this information, confirm that information.
Yeah, so if they detect fraud, and I can speak to Visions, they're gonna call you with I believe it's an automated message now, and it says, you know, you either need to call back this number, or they're going to give you options of yes or no questions that aren't really probing. They're not going to say, oh, is this your social security number? They're going to give you more kind of randomized questions to confirm that it's you. But then it's normally going to send you to a contact center advisor that can verify further. But they're really not going to call you and say, you need to provide us this information or else. So it's being very tricky about what they do. So they're going to alert you that something might be right, but it's not going to be a person that's going to demand information from you.
Right. And in general with phishing scams, I know I get a ton of them in my email personally, and it will look like it came from PayPal or a credit card company, and they always want you to click a link inside. Would you recommend that you never click on the link, but instead go to their website fresh to avoid a phishing scam?
Absolutely. And one of the best things that you can do, so aside from just saying, okay, I need to go check this out on their separate website, I'm a big fan of, if somebody either calls or emails you, separating yourself from that call or email, and then calling or emailing the person who they say they are, because they're going to understand that that happens. But also to that, if you get an email that you really weren't expecting, even if you were expecting it and it just doesn't sit right with you, a lot of times you can hover over the email address of where it's coming from, and it's going to either come up with information that just looks like a jarbled mess and it doesn't mean anything, or you can double check that email address, and there's going to be some sort of spelling error in that, even if it's something small, like they put an R instead of a P if it's PayPal or something like that, and it's something that's tough to notice at quick glance, or if there's a period where there shouldn't be, or there are lots of little telltale signs that will let you know that this is not a legitimate source. But if you do get an email like that, they should give you an alternative of going to a certain site externally. So instead of clicking on the link, check out how you can get there from an outside source. So if it is PayPal, go to the PayPal site and see what's going on there. But definitely just doing that kind of quick investigation is going to help you a lot.
All right. And then you talked about shredding financial documents. Is there for those that get theirs online now, is there a certain way to dispose of those documents that's safer?
The online documents?
Physically, yeah, we can't really physically shred them. So what would be the online alternative?
So the nice thing is they're going to be encrypted. So they come from a secure source as it is. So therefore somebody and somebody using a different, not trusted device or what have you will have a more difficult time getting into that. So while you can't really shred them, once they're done, making sure they're deleted. And then I always say with those type of things, delete them from your deleted items. So once you have them, everything's all good. You're not going to need it again. You can always go back and ask them to reprint you one. So if you delete it and then delete it forever from your deleted files, it's not gone forever, because your financial institution can always get those back for you. So just being sure that they're disposed of properly, and just they're not on a computer that's shared. You're not going to have your email just up and open is really important. So a big part of that, if it is a public computer that you're on and you do get e-statements, just be sure to sign out of your email before anybody else uses it, because you don't want somebody hopping on your email, looking through all of your information. And that's where those passwords really come into play as well, because as those statements are encrypted and they require you to sometimes answer questions before you open them to make sure that you're the proper owner. We always just want to be safe if we're using something like a public computer.
Okay. Uh-oh, I had a question. Where'd the brain go? Oh, are there certain groups of people that are more prone to identity theft?
Unfortunately, what you see more is the elderly population. There's a lot of scams that will call and say that a popular one is if you get a call and somebody on the other end pretends to be a grandson. Normally they'll ask for grandpa or grandma, and they'll say that they're in trouble and they don't want their parents to know. So they called them. My grandma got that call, but she didn't give them any information because she knew that we would never do that in a situation like that. We would never speak in that way. So just being aware, if you are a grandparent, or you do have grandparents, or your parents are a little bit older, having that conversation with them about, this is, how we speak to you on the phone. We would never call you grandma. Maybe I have a different name that I would call my grandma. I wouldn't say, grandma, I'm in trouble. So you do see a lot more with the elderly population. They're sometimes, unfortunately, less up to speed on certain digital aspects. So they might fall more victim to phishing scams or the social engineering if they're not really, if they're going hard of hearing or something like that. They might fall for that if somebody pretends to be their grandson or something like that. They might wire them money, and then they're out of that money. So unfortunately, you do see that in more of the elderly population. So really getting that out and making sure you're having the conversation with loved ones, that we really all need to be careful, and we really need to watch out for these things, is very, very important.
All right. And then would you say in general that anything that says you've won a contest, but that you have to send them money to receive the prize is probably always a scam?
By rule of thumb, yes. And you do see that a lot. And that's a classic kind of a phishing. Even if another big thing to that is, because a lot of these times when they say you won a contest, you didn't even sign up for the contest. And that's a big telltale. But if you win something and it's a legitimate contest, you're not gonna have to pay for anything. And another thing to look out for is especially on these times of Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace, things like that. I was selling a washing machine, and somebody said that they wanted to buy it from across the country, and they're gonna send me or write me a check for $200 more than that, but then I have to cash it and pay their driver because they're not going to be the ones to pick it up. That's a classic phishing scam. They're trying to get you to cash the check for them because they're assuming that you're trustworthy and that your institution is just going to cash a check for you, even though it's a bad check. But anything where you're getting more for something and you have to pay them back, if there's too much money being exchanged, that's very fishy, and that's something that you should definitely think more about. So it's definitely a red flag if either you win something and you're expected to pay a certain amount of money, or if you're selling something and somebody asks you to then pay money out. Those are suspicious things. Those are definitely red flags. And I can't say with 100% certainty that they are all scams, but I can probably say with 99% confidence that there are scams.
Kelly, I have the link for you for the credit report YouTube video. And that's also available on the Facebook page, and we will share this video as well. Did you have any questions you would like to ask Matt?
Well, thank you. First of all, this presentation was wonderful. And thank you for sending me that link as well. I did have one quick question. The credit report site that he referenced, I'm sorry, that you referenced, Matt, Is that like all three companies in one kind of deal, or is that you still have to do an individual Equifax and yeah, all three of those? There you go.
Yep. So for this, you are able to get one free report from each of them through annualcreditreport.com, which is great because it essentially gives you 3 credit reports per year that are free. But it is through one of each. So maybe 1 month I get the Equifax one month I get Experian, 1 month I get the TransUnion. So it's yes and no, I guess, to answer your question a little bit. It gives you access to the 3 reports, but they're all available to be gotten under the annualcreditreport.com.
Okay, so there's separate reports that you can get individually. Okay, perfect. That's what I was curious about.
Kelly, were there other topics concerning financial literacy that you might be interested in seeing more about, or that you've heard other people ask questions about that you think might be good for Matt to present for us on?
This one was a very good topic because my son and fiance actually had their credit card stolen. So this one was of interest to me. And of course, credit report was interesting to me. I haven't come across other ones as of yet. I do like his idea on the budgets though, when he said earlier.
Well, that's something that we had talked about when we first set this up, was starting at the very simple, like credit reports, fraud, budgets, and savings, and then expand into more complicated as people had questions. So it sounds like that's kind of what you're thinking too, is start with the basics and build from there.
Yes, definitely.
All right, great. If you ever think of any,
because it's really the foundation of financial wellness too. So budgeting is a great one.
great. Kelly, if you ever think of any questions for Matt, his email address is on there and he is super quick to answer. And if by chance you don't have quick access to his email address, you can always contact the library system. You'll get me and I will forward it to Matt. He did that for us last time actually, and got us an answer within minutes. So super helpful.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Matt. And we will usually do these. We were doing these the 3rd Friday of the month, but this month was weird. And so Matt and I will get together to get a date for the next one, and that will be available online as soon as we have a date. But in general, it's usually about the 3rd Friday.
Definitely.
All right. Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you for attending. And I will share the video here shortly. You guys have a great day. Enjoy the beautiful weather and happy 4th of July.
Fantastic. You too. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.